US investing is changing, and this is interesting from a global standpoint, as Europe has made this change a long time ago. And I believe it is beneficial to US companies. I believe that it is beneficial to how people operate their businesses. And through these changes, of course, you have large amounts of companies very heavily lobbying for this bill to pass. And of course, the executive branch has stated that he will sign it into law, and that, of course, he will do an executive order. And the bill that I'm speaking on is the 6-month finance rule, as opposed to the 4-quarter finance rule in the US. Now, for much of my European audience, you won't understand what 4 quarters in US cyclical markets means. As for you all, the EU and additionally European regulatory agencies outside of the EU have collectively decided that there's 2 halves in a year, as opposed to 4 quarters. But the US has consistently required reporting for 4 quarters as opposed to 2 halves. And this is interesting as, of course, it creates complexity in filing requirements. Now, the US has always had complexity in filing requirements, and this is nothing new. I think that anyone who has done US taxes whenever they move to Europe is like, this is child's play, as it is significantly easier to do taxes in Europe, even if you own a business. And I've done my own taxes for the past few years here. I've written off all my own taxes and so forth, and I've learned US tax law. Now, honestly speaking, I don't recommend anyone do that, as the money you'd spend on a CPA is worth it. However, for me, it was just a challenge I gave to myself, and I did it. However, essentially, what you're seeing now is the US finally realizing that their compliance culture is too bureaucratic, their compliance culture is eating away at businesses, and they're admitting this in the open now. And so, in essence, in the next few years, I believe that, yes, the US will become more business friendly. What that means exactly is to be determined. However, this is temporary, as the entirety of the US tends to be, as everything in the United States is cyclical. Now, cyclical temperaments in the United States is very interesting, as, of course, things change consistently. And this is a great arbitrage opportunity, which I'll go over in the near future. However, with that said, of course, you cannot bank on the US being the same in the next few years, as Trump will be voted out. He cannot be president again, and so if he tries, it's likely that, of course, the Constitution will be fought over. However, that essentially means that with the inevitability of the United States getting a new president, that laws will change. Now, I don't believe in leaving the United States for political reasons solely. Part of why I left was political, but I think that realistically, if you know how to deal with politics in the US, you can still live there. I could still live in the US. I left because I couldn't handle the culture of the United States and the hatred, the self-hatred that the United States has, which I'll make a video about later. However, essentially, with that, the pro-business policies of this current administration, the Trump administration, I do believe that they will be rolled back in large part. I do believe that the deficit spending is not going away, albeit, unlike most people understand, Trump has not yet blown up the deficit. He has not yet spent tons of money, and the reason why is because he pushed it off all until 2026, and it's 2025, so the huge jump in spending actually was delayed. That said, I do believe that there will be consequences to that, but as time goes on, I'll update you on what happens. That said, with the 2.5 rule, I believe that this will cut operating costs significantly, and I believe that realistically, people will be significantly more able to run businesses and learn about the code that is necessary to run a business. A lot of what US policy is keeping smaller businesses out of business. And even though small business is the number one employer in the United States, and it has been for probably since the foundation of the United States, it is difficult, and most difficult, for small businesses to create a separation between policy and reliability of their balance sheets, reliability of their debt burdens, and so forth. And so essentially what you get in the US is a country that is very driven by small to medium-sized enterprises that treats them like a threat to the state, which of course is due to the fact that the US, for all intents and purposes, is a corporatocracy, and lobbying rules the United States. And so I think that realistically, as time goes on, we'll see that happening more. However, again, in the current moment today, essentially what we're seeing is the United States turning a new leaf in terms of its business policy. And for all intents and purposes, this is a good thing. This is a win for businesses. And while it's not the totality I'd want in terms of business friendliness, I think that realistically, as time goes on, we will see more policies, more pro-business policies in the United States in the near future. This, again, is temporary, and I think that if you are a operator in the United States, you should be diversifying away and into markets that are more pro-business, places like Estonia, like Singapore, and I think that realistically with that, you'll get a lot better quality of service, a lot better ability to create businesses that are lasting. And so I think that even though there is pro-business policies going into effect, you should be careful with blindly trusting one candidate in the United States. That said, if you're at all interested in consulting about these things and about business and globalizing your lifestyle, feel free to reach out to me down below in the description. There's a Calendly link, one-on-one consulting, absolutely free, for 15 minutes. And additionally, if you are looking for a way to join me on this journey of globalization and internationalization, feel free to subscribe. And if you liked the video, feel free to like it. If you really liked the video, feel free to share it with your friends. This has been the Traveling Report, signing off.